Okay, so good morning. Today is Nedarim Daf Yud, and we are going to start two words from the end of the line of the last line. Let me share my screen and remind us exactly where we are. Yesterday we learned a Mishnah, the second Mishnah in Nedarim, and it says that, when one references the oaths of good people, so then there's a difference between using the term neder and the term nedava. That a neder is something that good people, kosher people, don't do, and so as a result, if you use the term neder, the oath is not valid. But Nedava is something that good people do. And so as a result, if you use the term Nedava, it is a valid oath. And then we noted that it appeared that our Mishnah was not like either Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yehuda from the following brisa, because the brisa says, Rabbi Meir says that if you had to rank, we were the psukim in Kohelet rank three different categories, or can be understood as a ranking of three different categories. There's the category of making a vow and fulfilling it. There's the category of making a vow and not fulfilling it. Needless to say, making a vow and fulfilling it is definitely going to be better than making a vow and not fulfilling it. And the third category is not making a vow and and therefore not fulfilling it, because you can't fulfill it if you didn't make a vow. So those are the three categories, and really, those are the only three potential categories, because again, you can't make a vow, not make a vow, and fulfill it. That doesn't make any sense. So we've got these three different categories, and so Rabbi Meir says that the ranking is at the top. Not making a vow is the best, then making a vow and fulfilling it, and then making a vow and not fulfilling it. And the pasuk can be understood to mean that when the psukim say the following, that you should make, if you make a vow, you should not delay in fulfilling it. You should fulfill it right away. Then it says better is not making a vow than making a vow and not fulfilling it. So what's the point? So the way Rabbi Meir understands that verse is that better than even making a vow and fulfilling it is not making a vow. Why? Because maybe you will come to not fulfill it. And so as a result, it's the best thing to do is just not make a vow. Okay? And he doesn't distinguish between a neder and a nedava. So as a result, that's what we're talking about. And the pasuk itself uses the term neder, uses the terminology of neder. So that's Rabbi Meir's view. He says, again, top is not making a vow at all, then making a vow and fulfilling, then making a vow and not fulfilling. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're not understanding the verse correctly. The verse should be understood as the best is making a vow and fulfilling. But if you're depending on whether you're going to make a vow and not fulfill, or make a vow and fulfill, or not make a vow, it's better to not make a vow than to make a vow and not fulfill. Now, why would you think that making a vow and not fulfilling is in any way better than not making a vow at all? And the answer is that the road to that, one might have thought that good intentions matter, that good intentions are the road to heaven. And in fact, the Ran explains that the point is that I might have thought that at the moment that I make the commitment, I have raised my level of kedusha. I've raised my level, in the world of Hashem's credits. That here, what have I done? I've gone out of my way to commit to do X mitzvah, to do this thing, etc. That's great. I should get credit for having wanted to do it. And then it turned out I wasn't able to do it. But I should still get credit for having made the commitment. So the answer is no, that is not something that you get credit. The Ran concludes by saying that you only get credit. Any credit that you get for an oath is based on your time of completion. When you complete it, then we can evaluate whether or not you should get credit for the oath. And so that is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Rabbi Yehuda says is we need to go out of our way. Rabbi Meir's like, of course, you don't need to be told that doing not making a vow is better than making a vow and not fulfilling it. That's obvious. And therefore, so Rabbi Meir says that it goes back to the earlier verse in saying that not making a vow is even better than making a vow and fulfilling. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's not so obvious. And so as a result, the verse can be understood in its very literal read. The very literal read is that it's better to not make a vow than to make a vow and not fulfill. So that was the thing. And the thing is that our Mishnah made this big distinction between a neder and a nedava, but this baraisa where Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing doesn't say anything about a nedava. Right. So as a result, so what's the story? So it seems like, again, we proposed that maybe our Mishnah is not like either. And then we said, no, you can actually say that it's like Rabbi Meir. And now we're going to begin by saying, you know what? We can also say it's like Rabbi Yehuda. And in fact, the interesting thing is, and the reason that I believe that the Gemara went through the entire discussion is that in the end, the opinion that we allow for Rabbi Meir to be like our Mishnah, and the opinion that we assign to Rabbi Yehuda to be like our Mishnah are going to end up being almost identical. So as a result, it's a really ibayas ema. You can't say both. You can't say that it's afilu. You can't, I mean, we're going to say afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda, but you can't say both. It seems like you can't say both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir are there. So let's take a look. So last two words on Ted Amabet, the ibayas ema afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. That if you want, you could say that, and now we turn to the Yud Amud Aleph, that in fact you can say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. And Ki Amar Rabbi Yehuda, when did Rabbi Yehuda make his statement that vowing and fulfilling is the best? B'nedava. Really, when he said that, he was talking about a nedava. B'neder lo amar. But when it comes to a neder, it's not true. And therefore, we've now read into him this distinction between neder and nedava. And so as a result, he could be consistent with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said a nedava is something that a kosher person does do. And therefore, if you say that I'm making like a nedava of a kosher person, you have made a valid vow. But if you say I made a neder of a kosher person, you haven't made a valid vow because a kosher person doesn't make a neder. But v'hakatani tov mizeh umizeh noder umekayim, that he used in the brisa, he used the language that better than one who does not vow and better than one who vows and does not pay is a noder umekayim, one who makes a neder and fulfills. Isn't that clearly stating it in the language of neder and not nedava? So tani nodev u'makayim. So you're right. You got to change the language in order to fit Rabbi Yehuda into our Mishnah. You're going to have to change the language. And when we do that, the Ran helps us understand the how Rabbi Yehuda understands the pasuk. So let's take a look at the top Ran on Yud Amud Aleph. The Rabbi Yehuda darish lehu l'krai k'Rabbi Meir. And that what really would happen is Rabbi Yehuda would agree with Rabbi Meir's read of the pasuk. That, remember, Rabbi Meir reads the pasuk as saying that better than making of, because the problem is that the pasuk, and we're not going to change the language of the pasuk, says neder. So as a result, when the pasuk begins by saying, the prior pasuk ends with the comment, make a neder and fulfill it, and then we say better is is not making a vow. And the point is, and why is that? It's because maybe you'll make a vow and not fulfill. So in the end, Rabbi Yehuda is going to agree with that. The tov mizeh umizeh she'enu noder kol ikar, that better than making a neder and fulfilling it, or making a neder and not fulfilling it, is not making a neder at all. Mihu baha paligale to Rabbi Meir. But in this concept, Rabbi Yehuda is going to argue with Rabbi Meir. Dila Rabbi Meir kra dinakat noder hu hadin lenodev. That according to this read of Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir says that the best is not making a neder, and the statement in the psukim is about neder, it also applies to nedava. Day, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, dafka noder, it's only about neder. Aval nodev tov mizeh umizeh. But if somebody makes a nedava and fulfills it, that's going to be the best of all worlds. So that's the Ran explaining how Rabbi Yehuda's read of that nedava could be better can fit with the psukim, because he's not reading that into the psukim directly. He's noting that the psukim are talking about neder, but they would not be true if it was talking about nedava. So maishna noder delo dilma asi beili de takala nedava nami dilma asi de takala. So the question that we asked yesterday, and we're asking when we were explaining Rabbi Meir, we now ask the same question with respect to Rabbi Yehuda, meaning what's the reason for the distinction? Because if the problem with making a neder, which is the implication of the pasuk, is that maybe you'll come to sin by not fulfilling it, well, why wouldn't you have the same concern in connection with a nedava? So Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. The Amar Adam maybe kivsa sola azara. That what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda says that a person should bring his lamb to the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash, aktisha, and then you should consecrate it, v'somech aleha, and then you put your hands on it and lean on it, v'shokata, and then you slaughter it. Meaning that just as we said in connection with Hillel HaZaken, when we were answering yesterday, that Hillel HaZaken used to bring his korban to the Beit HaMikdash before he would consecrate it, so too Rabbi Yehuda said the same thing. Now, if we take a look, we'll have a chance to do a Tosfos here. Tosfos is on the edge of the page, left edge of the page, towards the bottom side of the page, but in the very narrow lines, the fourth of the narrow line says Nedava nami asili de takala. That if he this is a quote from the pasuk this is a quote from the Gemara of the question that we just answered, that if in fact you make an nedava, shouldn't we also be worried about your failure to fulfill it? And umishani, and now the Tosfos adds that we answer Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, that Rabbi Yehuda goes according to his reason. Now we could have answered just as we answered on the last page where we referenced Hillel HaZaken, Ella Nichalei La'asuye mi Rabbi Yehuda Gufei. But the Gemara wants to and would prefer to answer from your Rabbi Yehuda himself. And similarly, when we ask a question about Gabi Naziros, when we ask a question about Naziros, Maisi mi Rabbi Yehuda, and we'll bring from Rabbi Yehuda the story of the Chasidim HaRishonim. And so the point is that it's always best when you have a question, if you can answer it from the person himself, that's going to be a stronger answer than bringing in a third party. And that's true in all kinds of settings. And I thought that was sufficiently interesting to be worth mentioning. So, all right. So now we've addressed how a nedava avoids sin when you're talking about a korban. But what about Tenach nedava de karbana? So now you've explained how we can deal with a nedava when it comes to an offering, because what do you do with the offering? You wait until the last minute until you make it holy and you make it your nedava. But what nedava de nazirus ma'ikal ameimar? Don't we have to worry about a nedava of nazirus, meaning maybe there's going to be a problem? So Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, meaning isn't nazirus problematic in and of itself? And we say, no, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we learned in a brisa, Chasidim HaRishonim Haimis Avin Lahavi Korban Chatas. The people who the Chasidim from the olden days, they wanted to bring the Korban Chatas, but they didn't sin unintentionally, and so as a result, they were not obligated to bring a Korban Chatas. Lefisha Eina Kadosh Baruch Hu, maybe to Kala Al Yadeim. Hashem didn't let them reach the stage of making a mistake by accident that would result in their having to bring a Korban Chatas. I think that is the seat that Lori usually sits in. So what would they do? Right? They want to bring a sin offering. How do you bring a sin offering if you don't sin? Well, secret answer. Actually, if you're female, the secret answer is you have a baby. But if you're male, the secret answer is omdenu misnadvim nazirus lamakom. They would make themselves a nazir. And at the end of the Nazirus period, you bring a sin offering. And that way they would be able to bring a korban chatas at the end of their Nazirus period. Okay, so that's all according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the point is that what we are seeing here is, although there is a sin offering associated with Naziros, Rabbi Yehuda's belief is that being a Nazir is inherently a good thing. It's okay for the Hasidim to become a Nazir. It's not actually, the chatas that you're making is not about sin. It's about returning to a different state, that as we change states, that change Tuma states, so to speak, then we then that results in a sin offering. Just so there are a number of different explanations that that commentaries give in this regard. So one is that what does it say? Hashem wouldn't allow them to bring a to make a transgression. So the point is that the idea is that if Hashem hadn't really been supervising them and guiding them and providing them with that extra level of protection, they inherently probably would have had to have a sin offering. So they feel some level of guilt associated with that, and so they want to assuage their guilt associated with the fact that God is protecting them by also offering a sin offering. Or the idea is that they want to have the opportunity of trying to offer all the different offerings, and this is one that they didn't have the chance to offer. Or alternatively, there's the concept that that in some way somebody who never sinned can never reach the level of somebody who sinned and did tshuva. So they want to try to without affirmatively sinning, they want to try and touch onto or hook into that concept of triggering some aspect of tshuva. So those are a couple of the different answers that are offered. I'm not sure that any of them are such a perfect answer, but I think the truth is that actually, so I'll say something radical here, right? The point is that when you say that somebody can't do something, there's a desire to do it. And the interesting thing is that here there's a way to enable it. And so too, when we have the opportunity to enable somebody to do something that's kodesh, and we should understand that that's a desire that people have. So to try and bring it into the modern day where we have people who would love to be able to do things. So
Rabbi, there are certain mitzvot, there's some mitzvot that we really would prefer not to do, and we shouldn't do if we don't have to. It's a mitzvah to give a get to your wife, but most of it really actually should not do that. It's a mitzvah to die al kiddush Hashem, but we certainly don't want very many people to do that. So 100%. I don't know what the issue is, why they're all wanting to bring sin offerings.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that the answers are not as good as the question. I agree with you. I mean, but that's why I'm offering an additional answer, which is that when you tell somebody that they can't do something and that this isn't the right thing to do, then especially when it's something that feels holy, then the people have a greater desire to do it. And what's interesting here is that
Rashi today?
Well, in Maseches Nedarim, rather than Rashi, we use the Ran. So we'll have some. I think we'll have another Ran shortly. So the point is that that may be an element of it that people prefer. So now let's take a look at the second view in this brisa. So we've already answered the question according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that a pious person does bring a sin offering. It's okay to bring a sin offering by becoming a Nazir. But Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo nadru b'Nazir. They would not actually make themselves a Nazir. Ella harotza lahavi ola misnadevu maybe. Right? If you wanted to bring an ola sacrifice, you would make a nedava to bring an ola, and then you do so. Shlamim misnadevu maybe. Again, if you wanted to bring a shlamim offering, you would make a promise to do so, and you would do so. Toda va'arba mine chlachma, a toda offering with its 4 kinds of breads, 40 loaves of bread. So then again, misnadevu, maybe you would again be able to make the commitment, and then you would do it. But aval b'naziros lo hisnadu, they would not make themselves into a nazir through a nedava, because kadesh lo yikaru chotin, because they didn't want to be called sinners. Shenemar v'chiper alav me'asher chatei al hanafesh. That the interesting thing is that this pasuk that talks about a nazir, this is a pasuk in Bamidbar, Perek Vav, pasuk Yud Aleph, and it says that he's going to provide atonement because the nazir became tamei. So even though it's only a tamei nazir in this pasuk that is being referenced, the understanding is clearly that even a regular nazir is considered a sinner. So Amar Abaye, Shimon Hatzadik, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar Hakapar, Kulan Shita Achas Hain. All of Rabbi Shimon Hatzadik and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar ben Hakapar, all of them have the same kind of approach. They all recognize the Nazir Chote Havi, that a Nazir is a sinner. So let's take a look at the Ran, and we'll see Kulan. This is 5-6 lines down in the narrow lines of the Ran. Kulan b'shita achas, mihu lo amruch mamish davar echad. Although they have the same general approach, they're not actually saying the same thing. To the Shimon HaTzadik, because when we saw Shimon HaTzadik yesterday, what did Shimon HaTzadik say yesterday? Shimon HaTzadik said yesterday that he didn't want to participate in an asham of a nazir who became tamei. A nazir who becomes tamei has to offer a special asham offering, and he didn't want to participate in it because he felt that if a nazir became tamei, he was worried that the nazir would have regretted his decision to become a nazir, because now he's going to have to be a nazir for a longer period of time. Because if you become tamei on day 27 of a 30-day nazir's period, you have to start all over again when you become tahor again. So you end up having to be a nazir for a much longer period. And so as a result, because you might have regretted it, so even though technically it's still an asham offering, he felt that you were effectively no longer a real nazir, and so as a result, the asham offering wasn't fully required, and so he didn't want to participate. But there was one situation where he felt that it was proper for the nazir to become a nazir, and so there he did participate in that asham. But the bottom line is that he's not. Because what does he say? Davka nazir tamehu shenikra chota. He felt that only a nazir who becomes tamei is considered a sinner because he wants to regret his becoming a nazir. As we will see in a moment, everybody else is going to say that the problem is because you're refraining from joy, you're causing pain for yourself. Elamishum demischaret. His point is because the person would regret it. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Elazar HaKapar afil nazir toar nikrachote. But when it comes to Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, even a kosher person, even a nazir who fulfills his entire nazir's period the first time and never becomes tamei, he also is a sinner because he is going to cause himself pain. Miu kulan shavin deika chet b'nazirus. But they all agree that the concept of chet does apply to nazirus. So Shimon HaTzadik for Rabbi Shimon Hada Amra. So back into the Gemara, when it came to a Shimon HaTzadik, that one we just explained yesterday. And when it came to Rabbi Shimon, well, that's the brisa that we just quoted where he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. But what about Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar in the name of Rabbi? Where does how do we know that he also thinks this? The Tanya, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, Rabbi Omer, what does Rabbi Elazar HaKapar say in the name of Rabbi? So, V'chiper alav me'asher chata al hanefesh, that again, this same pasuk, Bamidbar Vav Yud Aleph, that he's going to atone for himself having sinned. The what soul did he sin? What regarding what soul did he sin? The point is that he caused himself pain by abstaining from wine. He didn't allow himself to enjoy all the gifts that God has given us in this world. And now we can make, if once we say that refraining from even wine is considered a sin, well, then now we can make it ourselves a kal v'chomer. If somebody who refrains even from just wine is considered a sinner, how much more so somebody who fasts and refrains from everything, from any kind of food. So we see that anybody who creates for himself unnecessary fast is considered a sinner. V'hadain kra b'nazir. And so when it comes to this pasuk, tamek b'nazir tamek siv. So 1 second, we finally got to the obvious question about this pasuk from Bamidbar, meaning the pasuk in Bamidbar is not talking about a regular nazir. It's talking about a nazir who became tamei. So yes, a nazir who became tamei is a sinner. But how do you know that a nazir who doesn't become tamei is not a sinner? So the point is mishum deshana b'chetu, that the idea is that the sin, he has effectively done two sins, is the way they understand it. So the pasuk is va'asa kohen echad lechatos ve'echad leolah v'chiper alav me'asher chet al nefesh v'kidesh es rosho b'yomahu. That the idea is that he's going to have to bring a sin offering and an olah offering because of the sin al hanefesh. So the point is that there's a double sin involved in that situation. One sin is the fact that he made himself a nazir in the first place and therefore had to abstain from wine. And the second sin, the double aspect to it, according to the Ran, is because he also became tamei. Okay, so now that brings us to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah.
Before we get there, I have a question. Yeah, back when you're talking about bringing a Toda offering, there are specific conditions under which we're required to bring a Toda, completing a dangerous journey, recovering from an illness, or being released from prison. Are we permitted to bring a Toda in other circumstances?
My understanding is yes. That is my understanding. I'm not 100% sure, but on my understanding, and especially this Gemara, would certainly seem to imply that the answer is yes, because it says specifically that you can offer it as a nadava.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So what did we begin? We began Maseches Nedarim. If we look all the way back, if we want to turn back to Bet Amud Aleph, we said Kol Kinuye Nedarim Kinedarim. All of the Kinuyim is, again, usually means nicknames, but we every terminology that is similar to a neder is like a neder. And then we talked about, although the Mishnah didn't actually mention yadot, we then went into the topic of yadot and described what yadot are. Again, yadot are shorthand. So we have two different concepts that our first Mishnah mentioned. One is nicknames, and the second is yadot, or shorthand. And the problem is that all the discussion that we've had so far has been about yadot. Well, now we're finally getting back to the first topic of our Masechet, and that is kinuyim. So let's take a look and see what our Mishnah says. So ha'omer konam konach konas, if you use those kinds of alternative language, harei elu kinuyim lekorban, these are effectively nicknames of the word korban. Cherech, cherech, cheref, those harei elu kinuyim lecherim, those are nicknames for the word cherim. Nazik, naziach, paziach, those are harei elu kinuyim lenazirus. Those are nicknames for the word nazir. Shabusa, shakuka, and neder b'mohi. Well, we have to explain that last one. So obviously, all of these are alliterations They're very similar sounding, so we're going to see why we would have that in the Gemara. And then neder b'mohi. What's neder b'mohi? We take a look at Rashi. I'm sorry, at the Ran. Neder b'mohi harei, and again harei elu kinuyim l'shvua. All of these are like nicknames of the word shvua, or they're similar terms for shvua. And what does the Ran say? Middle of the I guess about a little further than the middle lines of the Ran, I guess it's the second Ran in the Mishnah on Yudam and Aleph. Neder b'moi harei elu kinuyim l'shvua, b'moi kinuye l'Moshe. The word mohi is a nickname for Moshe. And B'Shvuas Moshe, and Moshe made an oath, Kediksiv by Yoel Moshe, that when Moshe was dealing with his father-in-law Yisro, as he had just married Tzipora, or was about to. So that's where the Haki is of Yerushalmi, and this is what the Yerushalmi says, that the idea of Mohi is referring to Moshe, and Moshe made an oath, and so when we say a neder of Moshe, we can say that's considered a good shvua. So these are all kinds of different terms. So and behind Amar neder b'mohi below Amar, and then the Ran asked, well, why do we specifically focus on neder of Moshe and not shavusa, shakuka, b'mo, and the other kinds of languages? So Efresh b'Gemara b'siyata d'shmaya. So that he's going to explain later. So all right. So now we've got the Mishnah, and the Mishnah tells us again that we've got all these different kinds of other terms. So Itmar. Kinuyin, when it comes to these similar terms, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lashon Umoshein, that Rabbi Yochanan says the reason that these work is because in languages other than Aramaic or Hebrew, these are the words to say the word oath. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar Lashon Shabadu Lahem Chachamim Liyos Noder Lo, that these languages are badu, were thought of or conceived by the Chachamim to be a neder. Now, how do I know that badu means to be conceived? V'chein hu omer, because we have this pasuk in Melachim, B'chodesh asher bada milibo, that in the month that he conceived with his imagination. So the point is that that's how we know badu means to think about and to come up with. So for time of my takinu rabbanan kinuyin, why would, so according to Reish Lakish, who says that the rabbis came up, look, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it makes total sense. If you use the English word for an oath, so you've made an oath. But now, with respect to the Reish Lakish, who says that the rabbis came up with these terms, why would they come up with terms to let us just use the word neder? So, below lema korban, because we didn't want to say the word korban. Well, v'lema korban, why not just say the word korban? There's nothing wrong with saying the word korban. We could say the word korban all we want. Well, Dilma Amar korban la Hashem. Well, maybe you'll say that you're going to give something as a korban to God. Well, 1 second. V'lema korban la Hashem. It's okay to say a korban to Hashem, meaning if you're going to make something into a korban for Hashem, it's okay to say it. So, Dilma Amar la Hashem. Maybe you will try to do a shorthand and just say God's name. You won't just say the word Hashem. You'll say Adoshem. You'll say with a nai at the end. And so as a result, you'll be saying God's name. V'lo Amar Korban. And you won't actually reference the Korban. The Kamapik Shem Shemayim Levatala. And you'll have ended up saying God's name in vain. And let's take a look at the last Ran on the daf. Dilma Amar La Hashem V'lo Amar Korban. Umishum Haki. And because of this concern that maybe you'll say the word Hashem without saying the word Korban, Tiknu Konam. So the rabbis established that you would use the word Konam. Kihechi Dilema Konam Bilachud. And that way you'll say only Konam by itself. Di'ilu Amar Korban Amar Lashem Kilishna Dekra. Because if you say Korban, the words in the pasuk are in the Torah, it uses the phrase Korban La Hashem. And so as a result, if you say that I'm going to give a korban, then almost automatically, because you're so used to saying psukim, you'll say, oh, I'm going to give a korban l'Hashem. And since you're going to say Korban LaHashem, maybe you'll end up saying it in the reverse order, or you'll say LaHashem first, or you'll say LaHashem, that you're just like thinking that that would be sufficient. And the answer is that it's not sufficient, and therefore it would be saying Hashem's name in vain. And when it comes to a cherim also, Yehuda lo sagile becherim b'lechud shistam charamim b'Yehuda einam levedek habayit. That when it comes to the land of Yehuda, that we say that saying a cherim is not sufficient to say that it's a bedek for bedek habayit. Miu im amar cherim hu amar l'shem. Im amar cherim hu amar l'shem. Again, kediksiv aval ki amar cherech kaven de lo lav lishna dekra hu lo hava amar l'shem el lebedek habayit. So again, as a result, you won't say cherim LaHashem. You'll end up saying cherim lebedek habayit, and you'll get the right words in instead of saying the wrong words. And so as a result, the point is that this is all in order to prevent us and show how careful we should be about saying Hashem's name. Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer, and we have a brisa that supports this. Minayin shelo yomer adam LaHashem ola LaHashem mincha LaHashem toda LaHashem shlomim. How do I know that you shouldn't put Hashem before? Really, they mean the same thing. If I say Korban LaHashem or LaHashem Korban, Toda LaHashem or LaHashem Toda, those they in Hebrew they really mean the same thing. But the point is we shouldn't reverse the order, because Talmud Lomer Korban LaHashem. That's why the Torah specifically goes out of its way to say that the Korban before the word LaHashem, because we should be careful that whenever we say Hashem's name, we don't want to accidentally not finish if we take a look at the Mefarish, the top of that is headed as Rashi, but it's not. It probably isn't actually Rashi. Dilma Amar LaHashem below Gamar LaDibur Zeh. You'll begin the word LaHashem and you won't finish the phrase. All right, Delo Amar Karban. You won't say it's a Karban. Become Mapik Shem Shemayim Levatala, and you'll end up saying God's name in vain, and we don't want to say God's name in vain. Ella lechatchila boy lemeimer ola v'hadar LaHashem. So you say the word ola or korban or mincha or shlamim. You say all of those words first, and then you say LaHashem. Okay, so that is the explanation. And so now the Gemara wonders, lema. The Kal V'chomer. And a Kal V'chomer, if in fact you can't say LaHashem, Ola LaHashem, Mincha LaHashem, Toda LaHashem, Shlamim. So Kal V'chomer, Umazeh, Shalo Niskavein, El LaHazkir Shem Shemayim Ala Korban. Your intention is to say Hashem's name in connection with the Korban. So you have the right intention. Again, same concept. Good intention doesn't protect you. Amra Torah Korban LaHashem. So the pasuk says Korban LaHashem. So if we want to go so far out of our way to make sure to always say the word korban, the mincha, the ola, the shlamim, the toda before we say LaHashem, so all the more so we shouldn't just say LaHashem without saying anything else and saying Hashem's name in vain. So lema katanai, let's say that the dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, also known as Reish Lakish, let's say that dispute is actually a dispute among Tanaim. Because what do we have? We have a debate between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Let's see what that debate is. Beis Shammai omrim kinuyin asurin. That when it comes to making a nickname for an existing nickname for an oath, that constitutes an oath, and therefore the object will be prohibited. Ubeit Hillel omrim kinuyin mutarim. When it comes to nicknames of nicknames, it is a mutter thing. You have not made an oath. So my lav manda amar kinuyin asurin kasavar kinuyin lashon umos hain. So why is it that the Beis Hillel? Why is it that Beis Shammai says that that nicknames of nicknames are prohibited? It's because nicknames are really as Rabbi Yochanan said, they are terms that mean oath in different languages. And so when you say kinuyin, you just are adding more languages So it's not only nickname, equivalent words in Arabic and Spanish and French, but it's also German and English and Italian and so on and so on. So that's why it would be prohibited. Ulaman de Amr Mutarin, and when it comes to the Beis Hillel, who thinks that it's permitted, Kasavar Lashon Shabadu Bat Lahen Chachamim. He thinks that the Chachamim chose the specific words in our Mishnah, and it's only those words in our Mishnah and nothing else. So, no, you don't have to say that. Really, the Kuli Alma Kanuyan Lashon Umoshein. Really, you could say that everybody agrees with everybody agrees with with Rabbi Yochanan, that everybody agrees that these are foreign languages. Now, why do we need to specifically say this in this direction? Because the point is that with a goal, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't want to hold just like Beit Shammai. It's totally fine for Reish Lakish to hold like just Beis Hillel, because we paskin like Beis Hillel. But Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are Amoraim, and so as a result, they need to agree with the Beis Hillel, with whom the halacha is like. So as a result, we're saying that really Rabbi Yochanan could even agree with Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai sabri bahani nami mishtai umot, and Beis Shammai says that foreign nations also do in these other languages, meaning that these additional terms are used by other nations. And Rabbi Beis Hillel says, no, when you come, once you have a nickname of a nickname, you become, even though you can, in English, you can have like word A and word B can mean the same thing. Word B and word C can mean the same thing. But word A and C don't have to mean the same thing. And the most obvious example is to cleave, right? Cleave can be both like to cut, and it can mean to connect. And so you can have cleave is equal to connect, and cleave, connect is equal to cleave, and cleave is equal to cut. So connect and cut should mean the same thing, and that doesn't work. So the point is that you don't, just because you have a kinui of a kinuyan of a kinui, so it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work. And so Beit Hillel says that that's not necessarily going to work. So the ibayasem, or alternatively, we can explain again that Beit Hillel would agree with Rabbi Yochanan by saying Beit Shammai sabri gazrin and kinuyin mishum kinuyin, that when it comes to nicknames of nicknames, so Beit Shammai was concerned that if we don't prohibit somebody who uses a nickname of a nickname, so then we'll end up allowing somebody to use a nickname, and we won't say that that's also an oath. We're not worried about it. We know the difference between a nickname and a nickname of a nickname. And so as a result, in both those ways of understanding, the argument between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai is not the identical argument as Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So Hechi Dami Kinuyan Nedarim. So what are these cases of these of kinuyim of Nedarim? And so we're going to now give the examples. So Tana Rav Yosef, and this part will now go quickly because we're just going to use a lot of interesting, fun terms. We'll see fun names. So what are they? Maknamna, Maknocha, Maknachna, and Maknasna. So that would be the terms. You can see how they all touch on the word konam, and so as a result, but they're not identical. You can see even the first one even has all three of the letters kuf, nun, and mem, but it's different. It ends with a na sound, and so as a result, those are similar to what they're equivalent to, but they're not identical. And then similarly, what about similar terms for chayrim? So Tani Mefasha, they learned that Mefasha taught charakim, charachim, charafim. So again, those are the other terms. Kinuye kinuyim de nazirus. What are the similar terms, for the things that are similar to nazirus? So Tani Rav Yosef taught mechazakna, manzachna, and mapichna. So those were the similar terms. So what? Now we ask a series of questions, just as an aside, before we get to the Shavuos. So ibaylahu mifchazna mai, mitchazna mai, and mitazna mai. Well, what about these other terms that are, again, these sort of like a compromise? They're similar, but they're not exactly. So Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, kimna mai. What about kimna? Konam kamar. Do we say that that's like saying konam? Odilma kinman bishbesem kamar. Or do we say that kinman is actually some kind of like cinnamon? That it's so it's as a result, it's some kind of spice. So Amar le Rav Acha Brei de Rav Achia Ravashi Kina mai. What about the word kina? Is kina sufficiently close to kina? Or do we say kina shall turn to goals kamar? Or are we saying that he's saying the word chicken coop? Oh, Dilma Lashon to konam, or maybe it's similar enough to konam. So Tibai, all of these things are good questions, and we don't have a good answer. So kinuye kinuyen deshvua. What about hechidami? What's the situation of a term that's similar to the terms that are similar to shvua? So shavuel, shavusiel, and shukukael. So now Gemara asked about Shavuel. Shavuel ben Gershom mashma. Shavuel is a name. You can't use a name as a in order to get yourself into an oath. Ella Shavuvael, Shavusiel, Shakukael. So all right, so we changed it to Shavuvael instead of Shavuel. So the point is that we have all these different kinds of terms, and all of these terms would be considered a nickname of a nickname or a similar to a similar. And the point is that Rabbi Hillel says that they're not an oath. Beis Shammai says that they are an oath. So Amar Shmuel now tells us. So Amar, we mentioned. So Amar Ashivsa lo Amar Klum. If you said the word Ashivsa, you didn't say anything. Ashkika lo Amar Klum. And similarly, Ashkika, you didn't say anything. And Karincha lo Amar Klum. And again, if you said Karincha, you didn't say anything. So the point, or Karinsa, you didn't say anything. So the point is that you got all these different terms, and these ones are safe. There are a bunch of them that we said, are machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. There are a bunch that we said we actually don't know which category they're in. Bottom line is, don't say funny language, because if you say funny language, people might get confused. Maybe that's a lesson that we can hear from the fact that the bad things that happened in connection with the Bavel, Migdal Bavel in this last week's parsha. In any event, let's finish up, and with that we'll conclude. Neder b'mohi harei elu kinuyim. We said in our Mishnah that the neder of mohi is considered an equivalent term to a shvua, and is considered a shvua. So about that, there's a brisa. So Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer haomer b'mohi lo amar klum. If all you say is b'mohi, is according to mohi or according to Moshe, then you haven't said anything. But b'mamosa to amar b'mohi. But if you say b'mamosa, and now I'm not talking about the drink, but rather the mamosa can mean a pledge, and so that pledge that Moshe said, Harei elu kinuyin d'shvua. So that would constitute a nickname of a shvua. So the bottom line is that we have to be very careful about our language, so that we avoid taking oaths unnecessarily, and we should know exactly what it constitutes an oath. So now we've dealt with a bunch of kinuyin, and now the next Mishnah is going to put a number of the concepts that we've been discussing together, noting how one can use a variety of words of prohibition to create a vow that causes something to be prohibited through that association. So, for example, what if you say that something should be treated as if it's not kosher? So for details of that, please stay tuned for, God willing, tomorrow's daf. Shabbat shalom. Hold on just a second. He is adding, right? So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, well, first of all, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel this is a brisa, so he can argue on our Mishnah, but in any event, he's not necessarily arguing. He is just adding that that in addition to saying a neder b'moshe, b'mohi, if you were to say b'mamosa to amar mohi, that would also be good. So it's just adding. He's not no, if you say b'mohi and that's it, you don't add any additional words to it. The key in our Mishnah is that you said, if we go back to the Mishnah, right? Exactly. Noder b'mohi. So if you have to say a noder, you need that language of an oath without any kind of oath language. And what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel also adds is that you don't have to use literally the language of oath. You could use the language of something that's equivalent to an oath of a mimosa, and that would also get you to where you need to go. All right, so with that, we'll pick up, God willing, at the Mishnah tomorrow. I think that tomorrow will be the last time. My guess is that we'll do before mincha, but after that, next week we'll be learning Motzi Shabbos again with Ellie. God willing, presumably after Shabbos is over, as opposed to before mincha.
I have a question.
Yes, going to. Yes, go ahead, Charlie, please.
Yeah. So all these different forms, they look like different forms of words from different dialects or closely related languages. Have the Semitic languages experts examined this and looked at different sources, like in different dialects of Aramaic and Hebrew and all that?
Yeah, because you can argue that maybe Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish's argument is actually a historical one, and there should be a historical truth to it. So that's a good question. I'm not familiar with that.
There are other places where Chazal talk about pronunciation differences in different areas.
Yes. And so I am sure that somebody has looked into it. It would be interesting to think whether there's another explanation, that when Rabbi Yochanan says that it's Lashon Umos, whether there's another explanation that if it turns out that these are just made up terms that aren't associated with any language, that we can still have him argue and say something different. But I haven't really given it much thought. But it's an interesting question. If you do any research, let me know. And if I have a chance to, I will hopefully get a chance to report as well. So have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good job.
All right. Be well.